everyone, and welcome back to Kasha Sewing and Fashion Center. My name is Brenda Holtz, and I am here to share with you some basics of the tools of the trade that you will need to get your journey started. Now, in the previous mini courses, I gave you some ideas on how to use some of the tools of the trades. And like I said, you may or may not need them all, but I want to kind of make a few suggestions as to what you would need as a basis for your sewing journey, because you won't need all of that stuff. If you're going to start your journey, these are the things I suggest that you start with. And the first thing you need to start with is a sewing machine. So you need to get a sewing machine that is pretty sturdy, enough to handle maybe very light and maybe some heavyweight fabrics too. This is a Singer heavy duty sewing machine, and it works really good. I use it for all my classes because I have children that I work with too. So I want to have a machine that is durable enough to handle all of the stresses that it'll go through in terms of learning how to sew with young people. But you can also go to my Sew Amazing online courses. I have a video on what to look for when buying a sewing machine. So you can check out that video and it will give you some idea as to what you need to look for and maybe even some of the questions that you need to ask. And it will give you some opportunity to do some research. So you want to get a very good machine at a very good price. Okay. So I'm going to go over the things I think you can use if you are a beginner and you have nothing. You're starting from scratch. So you get your sewing machine, then you're going to get your supplies that you're going to need. So the first thing you're going to need is thread for your sewing machine, of course. And I always suggest you get black and white. Only buy the color threads when you're matching the fabric for the project that you're going to be working for. But good basic thread is black and white, and it's all-purpose 100% polyester. So those are good threads to have when you're sewing, and they're very strong. So don't get the cotton, don't get the buttonhole carpet twist, don't get the big spools, because that is not the thread you need for sewing on your sewing machine. You need a all-purpose thread, okay? You're also going to need a magnetic seam guide, and this sticks on your throat plate, and it's there to help you to sew straight. So you can line this magnet up with the lines on your throat plate here, and whatever size seam you're making, you can just put it on that line, and it will help you to guide your fabric along the edge of the seam guide so that you can sew a straight seam, okay? You're also going to need at least 3 bobbins, maybe more, because if you're changing threads, you're going to always need extra bobbins. Otherwise, you're going to be pulling the thread off the bottom every time you change your project and you change the colors of your thread. So always have like extra bobbins. You're also going to need extra needles. Needles, you always have extra needles, because if you only have maybe like 1 needle, once it breaks, then your project is done until you can get back to the fabric store to get more needles. Now, these are universal needles by Schmetz, and they fit pretty much in almost sewing machines. I won't see every sewing machine because Singer is very specific with their needles. You need to buy their needles if you're going to be using their machines. And I have used the Schmetz in the Singer sewing machines, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. I've had some problems with it. So I try to stick with the Singer sewing machine needles for their machines. You're also going to need scissors because you're going to be cutting. And I suggest get yourself a really good pair from the beginning. And these are dressmaker shears. And you can tell the difference between shears and regular scissors because they have molding on your thumb and your fingers, and it's bent so that you can cut along the surface of your fabric as you cut your pattern out. Okay, so this is an 8-inch pair of shears. You can get a larger, but I suggest you start here. Get yourself a really good pair. This is These scissors are by Ginger, and they are really, really good. They last a long time, but make sure you never drop them on the floor because this little screw here has like a little spring in there. If you get that out of line, then your blades don't line up and then your scissors don't cut. So just be really, careful with your good scissors. Now you're also going to need scissors that you can use for paper because you'll be cutting pattern paper. If you buy a commercial pattern, it has sheets of paper that you will have to cut your pattern away from. So you don't want to do that with your good scissors because if you switch back and forth from fabric to paper, your scissors are going to get really dull and then you're going to have them sharpened. So I suggest just get a pair of Dollar Tree scissors and use those to cut your paper. And you're also going to need scissors at your sewing machine, just a small little pair of scissors like this. That's good enough just to cut your threads at your sewing machine. So you will need those at your sewing machine so that you can cut your threads right there and rather than always reaching for these because they're kind of awkward. The bigger scissors are just kind of awkward when you're at the sewing machine and you just want to cut something. Now you're also going to need a seam ripper. This is a must because nobody's perfect. There will be times when you will rip. So you always need to have a ripper on hand and make sure it's a sharp ripper because they will go dull on you too. So make sure that your ripper cuts and the cutting is in the little curve. The curve of the seam ripper is where, let's see, right up in here. That is where the cutting takes place. So you want to keep that little part sharp as possible because if they go dull, then it's like it's time to get a new ripper. And they're fairly inexpensive. Then you're going to at some point in time, you may want to get a rotary cutter, but I suggest you don't get one like right away because if you're going to have a rotary cutter, you're going to need a rotary mat, and those things are really expensive. So consider this later on because it will save you a lot of time when you're cutting your patterns out. So it will save some time, but you will need a mat to go with it. Now, you're also going to need marking tools, and we went over all the marking tools, so you decide what you want to have. This one, I think I mentioned, was probably a really good value because it has the disappearing purple ink, or you can have the Mark Be Gone blue ink, which means that you would have to kind of wash it out or rub it out. This one will disappear within 24 to 72 hours, okay? And then I have the wax chalk, and you can also use the clay chalk I mentioned in the course too. So if you missed that, go back and just watch the video again. You're also going to need hand sewing needles. These are your hand sewing needles because you will be doing some basting, some hand sewing. So it's always good to have a needle. And sometimes hand sewing kind of repairs some of the bad stuff we do. We can always sew it by hand if we can't sew it by machine. But you're also going to need like your wax, your beeswax, because the beeswax will wax your thread to keep it from tangling when you're doing hand sewing. So it's always good to have a little beeswax. And you need to find a thimble. Now this has been a really hard thing to do because I have a metal thimble that I use all the time, but I cannot really, that is the only one that I have that fits my finger. I have not been able to find another metal zipper that fits my finger, but I did find some of the little rubber ones that would fit. And the way that it fits is that it doesn't fall off your finger. Then you know that's a good fit. Okay. So you're also going to need a pin cushion and pins. Okay, so you need to buy pins, and I suggest with the pins, you get the very, very long ones if you're a beginner because they're a lot easier to manipulate than the small ones with the little metal heads, and because they will get lost in your carpet if you have carpet or it's stuck on your floor and you can't see it. So these are visible on the floor, and they're easier to manipulate. And if you get a pin cushion, these are fairly inexpensive. You can get the tomato type. And this little strawberry on there is there to clean your hand sewing needles. So you just kind of run your needle through that little strawberry part, and it will clean your needles. Because sometimes when we're sewing a lot, our hands have oils in them, so sometimes they will kind of corrode the needles or get little black stuff on them or whatever. So you need to clean those needles out, especially if you're going to be hand sewing on something very, very light in color. Okay, so you're also going to need like a ruler, some type of a measuring ruler. It's always good to have a ruler. This is a 2 by 18-inch clear plastic ruler, and I went over that also in the video on measuring tools, as well as a measuring tape, because if you're going to be doing any measuring for any sewing for you or anybody else, you're going to have to measure their bodies. And it's always good to have like a curved ruler. Now, this is very inexpensive French curve, and it has the same curve as your pattern making rulers or even your dressmaking rulers. You just need a curve just in case you do some alterations to your pattern. You'll have a tool that you can use that will help to make that curve a little bit more symmetrical. Okay, so you can get the French curve. That is a good curve to have as well. Now, here's a couple of other things that I have in my arsenal that maybe other people don't consider, but it's always good to have. And I'm going to just suggest it, and you can decide. But I have duct tape. I have duct tape because sometimes when I'm doing my zippers and I rip them, or when you're ripping, you have those little threads where you've ripped in little short threads. I just take a piece of duct tape, roll it around, sticky side out, and just go through that and pull those little short threads out. And I'm good to go. So always have duct tape in your arsenal. And one other thing I suggest too is a fingernail file, because sometimes we get snags on our fingers. For me, I don't really wear a lot of extra nails because it's hard for me to work with very long nails. So I keep mine pretty short, but sometimes they do get snags. So I always have a fingernail file in my sewing room so that I will be able to take care of that and not snag, because you can snag very, very delicate fabrics. And a couple other things I suggest, and it's not mandatory, is that you have muslin. Now, I usually try to keep some muslin around because sometimes when you're working with a pattern and you're not really sure if it's going to fit, you could always try that pattern out in a muslin fabric rather before you try it out in your fashion fabric. Because once you cut it out in your fashion fabric and it's not fitting, it's just going to be a hot mess. So I suggest that maybe you have some muslin in your arsenal to make that garment up before you cut it out in your fashion fabric. And I always too like to have maybe a couple of yards of interfacing. And this is iron-on interfacing, and I suggest maybe about a medium weight for your interfacing, just to have it on in that way, because once you start a project, you don't want to keep running back and forth to the store. So all of these things I suggest for the beginner sewer to start with. You can always add some of the tools that I suggested in the class on Tools of the Trade, the other tools that you watched in the videos. So start here and then work your way up to some of the other stuff. Now, if you have not started your journey, start here, get your supplies and your equipment and things together, and then go to my Sew Amazing online courses, because they will take you from beginner to advanced sewing classes, and it will get your journey started real good, because in those classes, I give you techniques and I give you projects that relate to the techniques so that you can learn how to do them. All of these tools of the trade are in the beginner one course. So you'll get all of this information and how they are used in your arsenal and in your everyday sewing. So the techniques are the things that you need to do to learn, so you don't improvise, because we can improvise on some stuff. So it's best to learn the right way to do it rather than improvising. So it has been my pleasure working with you on Tools of the Trade. I hope you enjoyed these courses. Don't forget to check out my So Amazing online courses. And I'm going to be doing some other courses too to help you along the way. So just look for my classes. And this, of course, are all free. These are free classes. So I suggest that you take advantage of the free classes to get your journey started. So that is all I have for you today. I hope to see you in the next series of courses. I'm going to say bye for now.